Please be advised, all music tracks used in this production are sole property of Kelsunn Communications and are original compositions. Thank you. To everyone tuning in, welcome. This is Silas, your e-journalism social work advocate. You're listening to the Kelsunn-on-the-Air social work podcast, the program that promotes, celebrates, uplifts, and highlights the social work profession. This podcast aims to educate the general public to the vital contributions professional social workers make in every aspect of society, every day. Hello, everyone. This is Silas, your e-journalism social work advocate, host of the award-winning Kelsunn-on-the-Air social work podcast, produced by Kelsunn Communications, Incorporated. In October of 2020, I had the honor and privilege of being one of 15 social workers chosen nationally as the 2020-2021 Network for Social Work Management Policy Fellow. It was a 10-month research program. The culmination was a final presentation. The series is entitled Raise the Wage, the Case for Equitable Pay for Social Workers and Other Human Service Professionals. Up next in episode 2 of this series, we present Dr. Katherine Briar-Lawson, Dean Emeritus and Professor at the University of Albany School of Social Welfare in Albany, New York. Today I have the distinct pleasure of having with me a very wonderful and accomplished guest. I'd like to welcome to this presentation Dr. Katherine Briar-Lawson. She's Professor and Dean Emeritus of the Albany State University School of Social Welfare. Welcome to this presentation, Dr. Briar-Lawson.
Thank you. I'm honored to be here.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Now, you've had a lot of years of working to make social work better for us as a profession, for social workers individually, and for families. And one of the things that you're known for is your work in the child welfare sector and how to make that better. So the first thing I'd like you to talk about is in your book, Charting the Impacts of University Child Welfare Collaborations, you mentioned the process of preparing and maintaining a highly skilled, competent workforce of social workers. Can you explain the significance of that?
Thank you for asking. Our child welfare families, including their children, often involve some of the most complex and challenging issues, concerns, behaviors, traumas, life histories, and needs. And so, given how challenging and high need and high promise our child welfare families are, we need to have a profession serving them that's up to speed with some of the most skilled services that are not just clinical, that address substance abuse, trauma, mental health issues, depression, racism, domestic violence, as well as abuse and neglect, poverty, unemployment, homelessness, childcare needs. And when you put all those together, there's no profession in the human service arena that comes close to the skill base that social work has. So if you take the needs and the promise of a child who's in the child welfare system or child welfare families, and you put them together with the most prepared profession to serve them, as our research showed in that book, then social work and child welfare come together and become a very important fit.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Now, in the many years you've spent in the profession, in your professional opinion, how can we as a profession highlight the value of that workforce so that funders and policymakers understand the impact the social workers and the human services professionals have on society? How can we make it more prominent that they understand just how valuable the social work profession is to society?
Well, you know from your own journey, and certainly I from my own journey, that our work as social workers is not just enhancing or enabling or building capacity among those we serve, but in some cases, it's life-saving.
Mm-hmm.
It's life-extending. So when you look at social work and child welfare and what's needed to support child welfare families and children who've been victims of abuse and neglect, you not only need the best profession that's matched with that need base, but also one that can show a very high return on investment as well as the life-saving impacts.
Mm-hmm.
So the Centers for Disease Control in 2012 made the case that 1 year of abuse and neglect across all those who might have been abused and neglected will cost over a lifetime $124 billion.
Wow.
For our nation. And then you look at what it would take to eliminate poverty, or what it would take to eliminate homelessness with new housing, or the childcare gap, or the job gap. And you say, well, there's something here that if the life-saving, life-extending work of social workers in child welfare is so important, it simultaneously shows us that we're wasting billions of dollars in addition to the many lives that are shortened because of trauma, because of untreated victimization, because of the human cost of long-term neglect involving deep poverty or deep and prolonged parental depression. So as a nation, we can't not invest in our children, their families, and the profession that can not just restore well-being, but also ensure healthier and well-lived lives that otherwise could have been taken at a very early age through some of the most heinous and tragic deaths, because child welfare is also a life and death arena for social work practice.
Yes, absolutely. So, and now in the last 5 to 10 years, there's been a big push, especially on the national level, with the Social Work Reinvestment Act. Now they also, New York State and also the federal government is looking at trying to find ways to compensate clinical social workers more equitably, especially through some of the public ways of funding for healthcare. What is it going to take to get the funders and the elected officials to realize that because this workforce is so vital, that they need to be compensated more equitably so that we can retain more quality healthcare professionals such as social workers within the human services sector? How can we get them to realize that they got to loosen the purse strings?
Well, again, this is life-saving as well as cost-saving. So when you put the two together, you see that we're a throwaway society unless we invest in the children and families who we're serving in child welfare and the workforce that also serves them. For a long time, the workforce in child welfare was not a federal or top priority. And turnover has been as high as 40 or 50% a year, which has meant that some children might not get reunified with their parents. Others might not have gotten the skills that they needed with parenting or the treatment they needed with substance abuse or mental health issues. So we can't afford any human waste when we've got such promise with parents as well as the children who comprise all those we serve in the child welfare system. And I should add that increasingly, child welfare is a racial equity issue. It's not just about restoring well-being and restoring children and their relationships with their parents through reunification or placement prevention. It's also ensuring that our families, particularly those of color, have first call on services in our community. That those services might have gone to others who are less high need. Think about our recovery programs. How many beds in recovery programs, treatment programs, go to our parents or to our youth who have addiction problems or mental health problems versus those who are, well employed, perhaps middle income earners. So if you look at the needs, particularly of those through a racial disparity lens, you would say that our children, particularly those who are disproportionately in the system because of racism and exclusion of their parents from jobs and income supports, that those children and their parents should have first call on services in our community and in those very, very specialized programs as well. So child welfare is not just about well-being or just about ensuring longevity and a well-lived life for abused and neglected children and supports for their families. It's also about getting right services at the front end so that those who are poor, those who have been victims of racism and marginalization and exclusion, especially our African American and Native American children and their families, would have first call on the services that are best for them. So I think of child welfare as also the system that needs our help to build racial equity through a prevention and an early intervention series of strategies. Again, not only to get it right, but to ensure child well-being as well as family preservation.
Good. Thank you for that. Now, you've also done a lot to move forward the whole concept of storytelling and social workers telling their stories and getting other people to tell the stories of themselves being helped by a social work profession. So for students coming up in the profession, why, in your opinion, is it so important for the social work profession, especially our new incoming social workers, to learn the importance of using the media to help tell those stories?
First of all, I think that as social workers, we need to think of the public as our client. Mm-hmm. And if we don't bring our story and those stories of those we serve to the broader public, many may believe that those, for instance, who are in child welfare are somehow to blame themselves. Children, victims. What else would they believe? They may not know. So if we want to be the game changers and the transformational healers that social work represents, if we don't take our stories and our practices and some of our insights to the, quote, public as client, then how are they going to privilege tax reform and social justice and racial justice and child well-being and prevention services so that we then have the right legislation? Right now, our system, our child welfare system it's got some perverse parts built into it. For years, the only way you could get help to a child was to use foster care as a healing resource. Well, for maybe half the kids in foster care, that may have been a resource, but for many others, it has not been. Mm-hmm. Why would we not provide to families themselves the income supports, the services, the 24/7 supports that we provide to foster parents? Why aren't we providing those to families themselves? So again, thinking about the media and the role that the media can play as a change tool for social work and to get the word out, to get the understanding of the dynamics that lead to abuse and neglect, as well as to positive parenting, we need the media. And at the end of the day, here's the problem I see, and it's global. Families are the only cradle-to-grave system any nation has. And families do over 90% of all the caregiving, childcare, elder care, of all the health care, of all the education, of all the counseling, of all the norm enforcement in the world, not just in our country, but globally. And how many parents expected to perform all these roles are prepared to perform them, or even have the requisite income supports, jobs, housing, childcare to go with these critical, globally assigned roles. So if we have not given help to this cradle-to-grave institution across our globe, then we're setting up families to fail. We then blame families, take their kids away, and wonder why we have a flawed system. So much of the work right now is to look at how do we prepare and support families in a way that their children don't need to be placed out of the home, that they can learn to parent or to deal with a child who's got lots of disabilities and related challenges in new ways, giving them the skills. In some cases, it's meant somebody moving in as a coach or helping them 24/7, rather than using foster care as the only solution. Mm-hmm. So much of our work lately has been to have kinship care. Mm. Relatives step up to be an assist at the front end, so we can sharply reduce the number of children for whom foster care is the only resource. Mm-hmm. So part of getting our story out to the public as client is to ensure that everybody knows that there but for the grace of God, being a parent is tough. It's a role that none of us have really been fully prepared for, and it's much tougher if you don't have income supports, if you're locked out of jobs, if you're a victim of racial and other forms of discrimination. And then if you can only get services if you've been screened in and substantiated for abuse and neglect, and then you can't get jobs because there'll be a screen to see if you are qualified to work in early childhood or another profession, that at the front end, we're doing such perverse harm to the very parents we want to help. Mm. So part of getting the message out is to ensure that those who are the opinion leaders and elected officials understand that the system we have now is based on some old assumptions about parenting and about the role of others, substitute families, that now is seen in a new light, that we have the skills in social work, we have the knowledge base to prevent many out-of-home placements and support kinship care as well as first call on services. And we need the media to be our voice so that families aren't so frightened to come forward and say, I'm overwhelmed. We've got depression here. I need help. Mm-hmm. Can you pair me with a service system that can help me so I can be a better parent? Right now, if you speak out saying you need help, you might be referred to child protection services and be terrified. Mm-hmm. So parents often have to harm themselves and those they love to get help. And help hurts because it may mean that they're then substantiated for abuse and neglect. How perverse is that?
Yes.
We need the media to encourage families, parents, to seek help at the first blush of need, at the first sign that they're feeling overwhelmed. But we've got to have something for them. It can't just be a report to CPS. And so not only do we need the media to help shape a new norm about help seeking, that help starts here with social work, not in CPS, but outside of CPS, to support family wellness and family access to services. But we also need to think about the role of the media. The media has more influence on many of us, including how we raise our children.
Yes.
And some, in my prior experience as a former state administrator of child welfare, some media outlets are willing to see their roles as being family support hubs in communities. So imagine what it's like. This is an experience I actually had, where a TV company opens a family resource center or a family support center or a call-in line for families who are feeling overwhelmed so that they can get help before things get worse. But we don't have that as an entitlement. We do not have family resource centers as entitlements. We don't have family support systems as entitlements. Schools are very child-centered or youth-centered or not family-centered by and large. So we don't have many places for parents who are feeling overwhelmed to turn for help. And the media, I believe, could be key, not only in helping families get help with warm lines or family resource centers or family support services, but the media also needs to encourage the public to put its money where its convictions are, which is children have a right to be safe, free from abuse and neglect, and that those who serve them, social workers and others, also have a right to have a career that's based on helping and not surveillance or out-of-home placements as the only solution. So the system is moving right now. The child welfare system is going through its own transformation. Very exciting, very historic moment. But we must have the media standing with us as we move the norms to help seeking is the best thing you can do, rather than waiting for a teacher to make a report to CPS because she knows of no place to turn other than CPS.
Okay, well, thank you for that very detailed explanation of that. And then to wrap this up, you and I have talked, and there's been a lot of talk about, the exorbitant amount of money it costs for an individual to go and get their MSW. They're saddled with a lot of debt. And you had a lot to do with the Title IV-E stipend program that was instituted to help pay for students pursuing the MSW who wanted to go in the child welfare direction as their career pursuit. What do you see as the effectiveness of that program, and why do you think that it's needed to continue, to be continued, I should say?
Well, thank you for bringing that up. In the late 1980s, I, representing the National Association of Social Workers, along with a colleague, went to the Children's Bureau and said, we have a staffing crisis. We have 40% turnover every year. Children are dying. And we have a solution, and it's 4E funding, and it's in the Social Security Act. And we now need to partner between child welfare agencies and schools of social work to bring those funds into preparing students for child welfare work and child welfare workers to go back to school to get their degrees. And over the years, most states have developed 4E partnerships with their schools of social work, child welfare agencies, including tribal child welfare agencies. So we have both 4E and we also have what's called 4B. And again, with money from 4B through the National Child Welfare Workforce Institute, which I represent, we're able to help students, again, those who are returning to school as child welfare workers, or students who are matriculated, students in colleges and universities, to get their specialized child welfare master's or undergraduate degree in social work, but with a child welfare and trauma, race equity focus. We also have two national centers, one an institute, the National Child Welfare Workforce Institute, and the Quality Improvement Center for Workforce Development. And together, these two national bodies are helping with retention, with recruitment, and understanding that it's not enough just to prepare you and me to work in the child welfare system. If we find that the workload is too overloading, it is impossible for us to practice our social work skills, and we may also be experiencing burnout. We may even be fearing in the middle of the night that something's not right for a child. The work is so hard that if we don't have caseloads that are manageable and the services that parents need and that our youth, particularly those in foster care, need, then it's going to be hard to retain social workers. So loan forgiveness, 4E, 4B are terrific platforms, but we also have to change the culture and the workload and the work conditions that ensure child welfare worker well-being that parallels the child, youth, and family well-being goals that we also have.
Okay, well, thank you so much for that. So, Dr. Briar-Lawson, you're a wealth of knowledge, and we really appreciate you coming and sharing some of your wonderful insights for this special project. And I thank you so much for being a willing participant. And I also want to give you a special mention as my specific mentor. So I really appreciate that. And I want to go on record as saying that. So thank you so much for your contribution, not only to this project, but also to the social work profession in all the years that you've been involved. We do appreciate it. And thank you so much. This is Silas, your e-journalism social work advocate and host of the show. You've been listening to the Kelsunn-on-the-Air Social Work Podcast. This and all other programs are available on the Apple iTunes, SoundCloud, Spotify, and Anchor podcast platforms. Go to any search engine and type in Kelsunn-on-the-Air in the search window to hear this show in its entirety. Thank you for tuning in. This has been a Kelsunn Communications production.